On to part 6 of the tutorial for creating custom lakes for Pishtech's VR Sportfishing game. We are working with L3DT by Bundysoft in this segment of the tutorial. And in this segment, we are going to take this lake that we just created the height field for in the previous segment, and we are going to give it some climates. What is a climate in L3DT? It's a collection of terrain types or land cover types. Climate manager, we're going to bring this up. I'm going to show you a temperate climate that comes with the software just to show you an example of one. Here's a collection of land types. There are 18 in this climate. So again, a climate is a collection of land types, and for purposes of VR sport fishing, I suggest not more than 7. You can usually get away with 5 or fewer and still have a really nice lake. The more you have, the more processing it's going to take for, well, it's more work for you, but also more work for people's computers as people are trying to fish on the lakes you've created. So again, practical limit is probably around 7. I believe the game will support 10, but I don't use more than 7 myself in the lakes I create. Okay, well, what's a land type? We know a climate is a collection of them, but what is one land type? Let's look at one. Let's look, for example, at grass, and we will edit it to see this land type. Well, you have a few things here. General are things like what's it called, and what's on a map that shows what land types cover your map. This is the color it's going to appear, and you can change this. You can double-click and add your own color. You can make your own climates. You can make your own land types, and I suggest building several climates with just a few land types, again up to about 7. But let's talk about how L3DT decides which out of all these land types is going to get applied to which part of your landscape. Well, a base score, it's a combination of a bunch of these coefficients, these different number values, and all these types are sort of competing to see who's going to get a chunk of land. The higher your base score, you're saying overall I want a whole lot of grass. If I drag this up higher, saying I want this to be a really dominant type. How about gradient? It's set to 0, means gradient doesn't affect this land type right now. If you raise it, you're saying the more positive gradient we have, in other words, the steeper the slope of the land in any given area, the more grass is going to be predominant. Maybe we don't want grass in steep areas. Maybe we want it on flat areas. Well, we could drag it down to a negative value. Now we're saying, well, if it's really steep, we probably aren't going to see much grass. We're going to see more grass down where it's low. The flatter the land, the extra boost that grass gets, and the more of it we get there. Curvature of the landscape, how plain areas or varied areas, whether it's in water or not, that's whether it's part of a lake or in salinity, it's in the ocean. We don't have to worry about the ocean or even really the water setting for what we're doing. I'm going to cancel out of here, and I'm going to bring up a customized landscape or a climate I've added myself. We're going to go to Pish MW2 and edit that one. This one, it's actually got 8, but it's not going to use them all because of the lakes that I use it for. And you can combine multiple land types into a single splatting layer later. The simplest case would be have a few of them. Each one gives you a splatting layer and a texture on your world in the game. But again, we can blur multiple kinds here. Cliff face. Let's look at a cliff face, for example. Very high gradient score. Base score is very low. So unless you're in a high gradient, you're not likely anywhere else to see much cliff face. But if you're in a very high gradient, you get a very high boost. So this is something that we will see a lot there. Notice the altitude ranges. We have a minimum altitude of 0 meters, so we don't want cliffs below the surface the way this climate is set up. Mud, let's look at that one. We have a minimum altitude of -5, so we aren't in the really deep water, say 20 meters below the surface. We aren't going to have mud the way this is set up right now, and you can adjust this for every lake you create. So if we use this, we would maybe have sand or rock or other things in the deeper water at the bottom. Max altitude, 2.5 meters. The ramp, what that says is instead of having mud come to a sharp edge at exactly this 2.5 meters above our lake surface, we want that to sort of vary by 3 meters so we don't get a hard line at exactly that altitude. It's sort of like blurring your alpha map. It's the same general concept. Appearance, you can map it to a material, which it's got a manager for what material it's going to draw when it builds your texture for you, which is really cool. But I like to color code my land types in ways that are going to make sense to me. So my mud, I've made brown. My sand, I've made yellow. And so on. And rock is gray, etc. So that is a climate. Create your own climate with a collection of a handful of land types, whatever ones are necessary to represent the lake that you want to create. And you can save as many different climates, as many different land types as you want. What you want to do, I'm going to cancel out of here and not change anything right now. I'm going to go back to my design map, and I'm going to edit it. Again, if you edit it in Sapphire or something like this, you want to do all your design map work before you go and tweak things in Sapphire, or manually in an image editor change your texture map. But right now I'm just going to apply a climate, and I'm going to say that Pish MW2, I'm going to apply it to all. You wouldn't have to. You could use a brush and say, all right, one climate over here, another over here. Maybe you have one climate set up that is where grass is more dominant, and another one where things are more muddy, or you have a dead grass, a yellow marsh grass, something like that. Different types of vegetation you want to manually add to different parts of the lake. It's not really necessary to make it that complicated. I'm going to apply this one climate to the whole world, my entire map, and I'm going to calculate again. So fire up the calculation queue. See, actually, notice that I can now go straight to attributes map and these other things. As long as I didn't do anything that changes the height field, it's not going to make me recreate that. All right, I'm going to create the attributes map. All these dialogues that come up, if in doubt, take the defaults that are on the screen, but this isn't intended to teach you everything there is to know about L3DT, just a really brief introduction. I'm just going to accept the defaults. But what we just did by creating this, the attributes map, is we had L3DT apply the climate to the height field. Based on the climate that we had, anything that was, well, we didn't get any cliff faces, at least I don't see any right now. The green is generally grassy area. The yellow, remember, I had set up as sand. The brown for, well, this brown is actually stone. The darker brown is mud. So you see we got mud along the shoreline like we expected from those parameters I gave it. If it's fairly close to our water line, then it gets mud. We can go back and tweak other things. Also, let's take one more look at the climate manager and edit something else here. I want to show you the noise. You can play around with these. They're a little more complicated, but different types of noise, if you want to see some sort of fractal patterns to the distribution of mud versus sand. See, if, I'll cancel out of a few things, all things being equal, without noise, we probably would have gotten all sand or all mud, or stone rather, on the bottom here. We didn't really want that. We want some areas that are sandier, some that are rockier. For this map, at least, that's what I wanted. But that's up to you. So play around with it, but add noise if you want. Okay, why does what do we do with this attribute map? Well, we want to make images, alpha maps, for our splatting layers. We can do that. We can export this image, and we're going to do that in a little bit to in the next tutorial to use this to create our alpha maps. All right. Also, we can calculate a texture map. Let's do that real quick. I'm also going to create the terrain normals and the light map, so it's going to sort of simulate lighting my whole place here, my environment. You can pick the altitude, the position, the color of the sun. I'm going to lower the elevation of the sun so we get longer shadows. And I don't want water effects. If I said yes to that, it would tint. We'd see some blue and colors, different colors on the bottom of the lake, but we don't need that. And here comes our texture map, and now it's going to generate a texture image. And look how beautiful this is. This can become our overall texture for the lake, and it's much more realistic than anything we're going to draw by hand. So on to the next section, where we are going to talk about getting these textures and alpha maps out of L3DT and into the game.